It was just past midnight when Ethan Cole spotted the familiar silver sedan swerving dangerously near the sidewalk outside the downtown bar. The tires screeched, headlights flickered, and a woman stumbled out of the driver's seat, heels uneven, purse dangling, mascara smeared like tear tracks on her face. Ethan's chest tightened when he realized who it was. His boss, Claire Donovan. The same woman who barely looked him in the eye during meetings, who'd once called him quiet and overly sentimental for a finance manager. But right now, she wasn't the sharp, confident director of Donovan Holdings. She was a woman on the edge of breaking apart. And she was about to walk straight into trouble. If you believe kindness still has power, and that second chances can change lives, make sure you like, comment, share, and subscribe to Ripple of Kindness. Because what you're about to hear is proof that a single moment of compassion can rewrite two lives forever. Ethan had been walking home after his shift, his 5-year-old daughter asleep in his arms earlier that night as he left her with his neighbor. His life was a constant loop of work, parenting, and quiet sacrifice, barely scraping enough to keep their small apartment warm. But tonight, seeing Claire stumble toward a group of men outside the bar, laughing too loudly and too close, something in him froze. They were the kind of men who preyed on weakness, and she, in her fragile, heartbroken state, was walking right into danger. Without a thought for his own exhaustion, he stepped forward. "Ma'am," he said gently, catching her wrist before one of the men could. "You shouldn't be out here alone." Claire looked up, eyes glassy and confused, voice trembling. "Ethan, what are you? You work for me, don't you?" The recognition in her slurred tone broke him a little. It wasn't arrogance, just pain hiding behind alcohol. One of the men sneered, stepping closer. "Hey, buddy, she doesn't seem to mind us. Why don't you back off?" Ethan's hand tightened slightly. He didn't like fights. He'd avoided them all his life. But tonight, protecting her felt instinctive. His daughter's face flashed in his mind. Innocent, trusting. He couldn't stand by. Moments later, he guided Claire into his car, an old grey hatchback that smelled faintly of crayons and cheap coffee. She was mumbling apologies, cheeks flushed. "You shouldn't have followed me," she said weakly. "I didn't," Ethan replied softly. "I just happened to be in the right place." He didn't tell her she was seconds away from something terrible. He didn't tell her how her eyes looked like someone who'd given up. Instead, he drove her home in silence, her head leaning against the window, breathing uneven. When they reached her apartment complex, tall, cold, and far more expensive than anything he'd ever afford, Ethan helped her upstairs. He'd never seen her this small, this human. Inside, her place was spotless but lifeless. No photos, no warmth, just sleek furniture and dim lights. "You can go," she murmured, waving her hand, then paused, eyes flicking to the small scratch on his wrist from earlier. "You got hurt." He shrugged. "I've been through worse." And that was the truth. He tucked a blanket around her as she fell asleep on the couch, whispering something about losing everything. He didn't ask what she meant. He just turned off the lights, locked the door behind him, and left into the cold night, his heart heavy yet oddly peaceful. The next morning, sunlight spilled over Ethan's small kitchen as he packed lunch for his daughter, Lila. "Daddy, can I take the pink box today?" she chirped, her curls bouncing. He smiled, nodding. She was his reason for breathing, his anchor in a world that often felt too harsh. When he dropped her off at preschool and reached the office later, exhaustion hit him, but so did surprise. Claire Donovan, in a crisp white blouse and black slacks, was already at her desk. Except this time, she wasn't the usual composed boss. She looked soft, nervous even. When their eyes met, she stood abruptly. "Ethan, can I see you in my office?" The entire floor went silent. Whispers followed him as he walked in, thinking she might reprimand him for interfering in her personal life. But when the door closed, she didn't speak right away. She just stared at him, her eyes glistening slightly. "You brought me home last night," she said quietly. "It wasn't a question. You saved me." Ethan nodded once, unsure what to say. "I didn't want anything to happen to you," he said finally. "I was a mess," she finished. "Still am, honestly." Then she took a breath that trembled. Most people would have walked away. Why didn't you? Ethan hesitated. Because someone once did that for me, he said softly. When my wife died 3 years ago, I lost everything, my will, my faith, my sense of direction. One of my neighbors, an old woman, found me sitting outside in the rain one night and told me, kindness isn't about who deserves it, it's about who needs it. I guess I just remembered that. The words hung in the air like something sacred. Claire's lips parted, her eyes filling. For the first time, she wasn't a CEO or a figure of power. She was just a woman who'd forgotten how to be cared for. I don't know if I deserve that kind of kindness, she whispered. Ethan smiled faintly. Maybe not, but that's why it matters. The rest of the day passed in silence, but something subtle had shifted. The next week, Claire started greeting people differently. She listened, she smiled, even if briefly. And to Ethan's disbelief, she began visiting the accounting floor, something she'd never done before. Once, she stopped by his desk with coffee. You take yours black, right? She asked, setting it down. He blinked, surprised. You didn't have to. She shrugged. Neither did you. Over the next month, their strange bond grew in quiet ways. She'd ask about Lila, sometimes dropping by with small gifts, a coloring book, a teddy bear. Ethan didn't know what to make of it. He wasn't used to anyone caring. But one afternoon, as a storm raged outside, he overheard 2 managers mocking him for playing hero to get close to the boss. Their laughter stung, but he said nothing, until Claire walked past. She stopped, looked at them and said firmly, if compassion is weakness, then maybe this company needs more of it. The silence afterward was thunderous. Later that evening, as they left the building, she looked at him and said softly, you shouldn't let anyone make you feel small for doing the right thing. He nodded. Old habits die hard. Claire's gaze softened. Then maybe it's time you start new ones. The turning point came 2 weeks later. Ethan received a call from Lila's school during a critical presentation. She'd fallen and needed stitches. Torn between duty and love, he hesitated for a split second, then grabbed his coat. When he returned the next day expecting backlash, he found Claire had covered for him. She'd finished his part of the presentation flawlessly, telling the board he had somewhere far more important to be. That evening, she stopped by the hospital to see Lila, bringing a small stuffed penguin. The little girl's eyes lit up, and in that moment something in Claire cracked open. Watching Ethan fuss over his daughter, gentle yet strong, she felt a warmth she hadn't known in years. You're a good father, she said quietly. You're a good person. Ethan smiled tiredly. I just try. The next morning, Ethan arrived at work to find an envelope on his desk. Inside was a note in Claire's elegant handwriting. You reminded me that people still care, that I still can, thank you. C. Alongside it was a new offer letter. Promotion, better salary, flexible hours for parenting. Ethan blinked, his chest tightening. No words could have captured what he felt. Weeks passed, and with each one the distance between them closed. Sometimes they'd talk on the office terrace, sharing stories of loss and hope. Claire confessed she'd been drinking that night because it was her brother's death anniversary. He'd been her only family, and she'd buried the grief beneath work and wine. You showing up that night, she said one afternoon, was the universe reminding me that maybe I'm not beyond saving. Ethan smiled softly. No one is. As spring bloomed, their lives intertwined in quiet harmony, 2 broken souls mending each other in ways neither expected. Lila adored her Aunt Claire, and for the first time in years, laughter returned to both their homes. But more than that, respect and understanding grew where there had once been walls. If this story touched your heart, please don't forget to like, comment, and share it. Subscribe to Ripple of Kindness for more real emotional stories that remind us how small acts can change everything. Before you scroll, leave a comment below. Kindness never goes unseen. Because sometimes the most powerful transformations begin not with grand gestures, but with one quiet night, one helping hand, and the courage to care when no one else does.